So let's go ahead and start setting up our Quart MySQL boilerplate application. Like I've done in other courses, we're going to build a counter application that stores a counter in MySQL and increases it by 1 every time you reload the page. This will allow us to see how a typical Quart MySQL application is laid out. One new thing we'll use here is Alembic for database migrations. Alembic is what powers Flask migrations under the hood, but Flask migrations won't work with Quart since it uses the ORM component. Even though it's a bit more complicated to set it up the first time, we will be using this boilerplate when we create other MySQL Quart applications down the road, so we won't have to repeat the setup from scratch again. So let's begin by creating the Quart environment variables that will be loaded to our environment by python.env. Make sure to create the projects folder. I'll call mine quart-mysql-boilerplate. Once that's done, change the directory inside that folder. So create the .quartenv file and type the following code. First, the Quart app will be a small Kickstarter managed.py file that creates an instance of our application using the factory pattern, just like I've done previously on my Flask course. Next, the Quart env environment will define as development so that we have meaningful error pages. We'll also add a secret key. Even though it's not essentially needed, it's a good practice to have it. The next 5 variables, DB username, DB password, DB host, and database name, will allow us to connect to the database. The MySQL root password is needed so that our test utility can create the test database and destroy it on demand. Save the file. We'll now need to create a settings.py file, so we'll use very similar variables from the Quart env with the following format. As we saw earlier, python.env will load the variables in .quartenv and load it as environment variables in our computer, so then settings.py can access them using the OS environment. We do this so that we can then deploy to a production environment easily, with the proper environment variables set in the production hosts. Save the file. We'll now initialize our pipenv environment using the Python 3.7 initialization to guarantee we have the right Python version in the pip file. You might notice that the virtual environment that pipenv created was located inside my working directory. This is not the default behavior, but I like to have the venv directory alongside my code without committing it. To make that your default behavior, you need to set an environment variable in your host with the name pipenv venv in project set to enabled. On the Mac, you can add it to your bash profile like this. In Windows 10, just edit your system environment variables and set it. You can find them by typing env on your Windows search and click on the Edit the System Environment Variables. Then click on the Environment Variables button on the lower right. Click the New button, add the pipenv venv in project variable, and set the value to enabled. Now let's go ahead and install Quart and python.env. pipenv install Quart python.env. We're now ready to start setting up the MySQL and set up Alembic migrations.